Emily Grant stepped out of the Uber in front of the sprawling family estate, the Thanksgiving air sharp with the scent of roasted turkey and fallen leaves. Through the tall windows of the colonial home, she could already see her cousins gathered in the warm glow of chandeliers, their champagne glasses lifted as though each toast were a performance meant to outshine the last. For a fleeting moment, she remembered Walter Sterling's voice, calm and steady, reminding her, "The moment you need to prove your worth is the moment you've forgotten it." Those words had carried her through years of building her company in silence. But tonight, surrounded by relatives who measured everything in cars and houses, she knew they would be tested again. The purpose of her arrival was simple: endure another family dinner, another round of subtle mockery, another evening where she would be measured and dismissed. She told herself it was just one night, but in her heart, she sensed that something would shift before dessert was served. The Grant estate stood proudly in Hudson Valley, its white columns wrapped with evergreen garlands, a hint of frost glittering on the iron gates. Inside, the great hall opened into a dining room that seemed carved out of memory itself, polished oak floors, silver candelabras, and the scent of cinnamon pies cooling somewhere in the kitchen. Family photographs lined the walls, black and white portraits of stoic ancestors, and more recent snapshots of children in Halloween costumes, graduations, weddings. Emily noticed, not for the first time, that her own face was absent from many of those frames. Gregory Grant was the first to greet her. Tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray in his hair, he wrapped her in an embrace that carried more pride than words could. "My girl," he whispered, low enough that only she could hear. "I read the filings. You've done well." His eyes glimmered, though he quickly let her go as if to keep the moment private. Diane Grant, elegant in navy silk and a string of pearls, appeared next. She kissed her daughter's cheek, but held her at arm's length to inspect the simple blouse Emily had chosen. "You could have worn the Chanel dress I sent for your birthday," she said, her voice smooth but edged. "This is fine, I suppose." Emily smiled faintly. "It's comfortable, Mother." Her mother sighed, smoothing an imaginary crease in her skirt. "Comfort has its place, but not at a table like this." From the salon came a booming laugh. Uncle Harold Mercer, her father's younger brother, already deep in conversation about a financial acquisition. Emily could hear him from across the hall, bragging about billions added to portfolios as though he were announcing a weather forecast. The air in the room shifted as she stepped in, eyes turning briefly toward her before settling back on Harold's theatrics. Jason Mercer, Harold's son, moved with a swagger that belonged more to a stage actor than a cousin. He leaned back in his chair, a glass of Bordeaux in hand, and smirked as Emily passed. "Still taking the bus these days, Emily?" he asked, loud enough for the cluster around him to hear. A few chuckles followed. Emily paused, her heart tightening. She caught sight of Gregory, who clenched his jaw but said nothing. With a calm she barely felt, she answered, "I get where I need to go." Then she walked to her seat, refusing to offer more. The table was a spectacle in itself. Crystal glasses glowed in the candlelight, silverware lined with military precision, the turkey at its center a masterpiece of golden skin. Family members exchanged remarks about ski trips to Aspen, new jewelry bought on Madison Avenue, and real estate investments that sounded less like homes and more like trophies. Diane slipped into conversation easily, nodding as Harold described the exquisite Italian marble in his kitchen renovation. Emily lowered herself into the seat Gregory had saved for her, close enough to hear every gloating remark. She folded her napkin across her lap, glancing at the portraits overhead. Generations of Grants looked down on her, their painted eyes filled with silent judgment. As soup was served in delicate porcelain bowls, Emily felt Jason's gaze again. His smirk had sharpened. "You know, cousin," he said, swirling his spoon, "image is everything in this family. Without it, you're nothing." The words landed heavy, like stones tossed into a still pond. Around the table, some averted their eyes, others hid a smile. Emily held his stare for a breath, then lowered her gaze, letting the fire of his insult settle into silence. Beneath the cuff of her blouse, Walter Sterling's watch caught the faintest glint of light. She adjusted her sleeve to cover it, unaware that Gregory's eyes had already followed the gleam. Dinner continued with chatter and clinking glasses, but Gregory's expression lingered. He leaned back, studying his daughter quietly, as if he had just glimpsed a secret no one else had noticed. Emily lifted her spoon, tasting the butternut squash soup, the warmth spreading across her tongue. She told herself to endure it, to wait, to let them laugh and boast. She thought of Walter's voice again. Let them have their trophies. You are building something that will last. And yet, as Jason raised his glass across the table, smirking still, Emily knew this night would not end as quietly as the others had. You know, cousin, image is everything in this family. Without it, you're nothing. The second course was being served roasted beet salad with goat cheese, candied walnuts, and a drizzle of balsamic when Jason Mercer leaned forward, his smile thin and sharp as a blade. "So, Emily," he began, his tone deliberately casual, "how's that little business of yours? Still renting cubicles downtown?" His voice carried across the long dining table, ensuring everyone could hear. Emily's fork hesitated above her plate. For an instant, she felt the weight of Walter Sterling's handwritten note tucked safely in her desk back home, the one she had read earlier that morning. Use the watch when you need to remind them who you are. She did not intend to brandish it now, but his words settled in her chest like armor. This night was never meant to be about proving herself. The goal had always been to endure the familiar cycle, their boasts, their subtle dismissals, their pointed laughter. Yet already, she could sense the dinner shifting into something more venomous. Tonight the mockery felt different, sharper, coordinated, as though Harold and Jason had agreed in advance that she would be the evening's entertainment. The dining room glowed under candlelight, though the atmosphere was colder than the November air outside. Silver trays glinted as servants moved gracefully between chairs, pouring Bordeaux into crystal glasses. The clinking of cutlery punctuated the rising tension. Though conversations seemed designed less for fellowship than for competition, Jason's smirk widened when Emily did not immediately respond. His father, Harold Mercer, leaned in with a patronizing chuckle. "She's still at it, Jason. Persistence is a virtue, I suppose, though perhaps she might one day see the wisdom of working with her family. Gregory could surely find her a respectable position at the firm." His tone, though softened by a smile, carried the unmistakable sting of dismissal. Vanessa Mercer, cheeks flushed with champagne, clasped her hands together in mock delight. "Oh, Emily, you must come to see our villa in Capri next summer. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, private beach access. You would adore it, though I imagine you are too busy with spreadsheets." She laughed, a high sound that carried across the table. Emily placed her fork down gently, choosing silence once again. She turned her attention to her salad, its ruby slices of beet glistening under the flicker of candlelight. She knew their game. Every word was bait. Diane Grant, her mother, adjusted her pearl necklace with a sigh. "Darling," she said softly, "if only you would dress the part. Appearances matter." She gave Emily a look that was half apology, half demand. The rest of the family reveled in stories of acquisitions, renovations, and indulgent vacations. Harold boasted about the difficulty of importing Italian marble for his new kitchen, while Bradley detailed his upcoming trip to Riyadh on a corporate jet. Vanessa interrupted with tales of couture fittings, and Claire scrolled through photographs of her recent stay in the Maldives, offering the phone to anyone who cared to admire. The conversation was a symphony of arrogance, each voice competing for dominance. Emily felt herself shrinking into the corner of her chair, yet her silence was not weakness, it was resolve. She heard Sterling again, as if he sat beside her. True wealth is invisible, Emily. If you have to show it, you've already lost it. Jason raised his wine glass high, his smile cruel. To family success, the real kind. His toast was met with laughter, the sound ringing hollow in the cavernous room. Emily glanced at her father. Gregory's expression had hardened, though he said nothing. His hand gripped the stem of his glass tighter than before. She could see in his eyes that he had heard enough, though he still waited, watchful. The tension swelled as dessert plates were cleared to make room for the main course. Forks clinked, glasses were refilled, and still the air pulsed with unspoken challenge. Emily reached for her water, her sleeve slipping slightly to reveal the glint of Sterling's watch beneath. Gregory's gaze caught it immediately. His eyes narrowed, his voice firm enough to cut through Jason's chuckling. "Emily," he said, the name carrying authority across the table. "May I see that watch?" Every sound in the room stopped. The laughter, the boasts, even the scrape of forks all silenced. Eyes turned toward Emily's wrist, curiosity flickering like a match struck in the dark. "Emily, may I see that watch?" Forks clattered against china as Gregory Grant reached across the candlelit table and lifted his daughter's wrist into the glow. His voice, low but steady, carried over the stunned silence. "This is a Walter Sterling original." The name itself fell like a thunderclap. The hum of conversation died, leaving only the crackle of fire in the distant hearth. Emily's breath caught. She had known the watch would draw notice one day, but she had not expected her father to be the one to call it out here, at the family table. Sterling's words echoed in her mind. "This watch is more than time. It is a legacy. When they see it, they'll see you." Tonight, those words were being tested before an audience of skeptics. The chapter's heart was no longer about enduring mockery. Now the goal was to shift the balance of power, to reveal connections that none of them could dismiss, and to see how far envy could push the Mercer side of the family. The dining room, once loud with boasts of yachts and European villas, had become a theater of suspicion. Candles burned lower, their flickering shadows stretching across the oil paintings of stern ancestors who seemed to watch the unfolding drama. Silver trays lay forgotten, and the scent of roasted salmon rose from plates no one touched. Gregory's eyes were locked on the watch, his thumb brushing lightly over the etched metal. "There were only a handful of these made," he said, his voice carrying both reverence and disbelief. Sterling crafted them by hand, before he ever entered the world of technology. He lifted his gaze toward Emily, his expression unreadable but intense. "How did you come to possess this?" Emily felt dozens of eyes on her. Jason Mercer's smirk faltered for the first time that evening, replaced by confusion. Vanessa leaned forward, her glass of champagne forgotten. Even Diane, usually unflappable, pressed a napkin to her lips as though steadying herself. She drew in a slow breath. "Because he gave it to me," she said softly. Harold Mercer barked a laugh, though it rang hollow. "To you? Impossible. Walter Sterling was a legend. He would not have wasted time on—" He stopped, catching Gregory's sharp glare. Jason leaned in, incredulous. "Why you, Emily? What makes you so special?" Emily met his gaze with a steadiness that unnerved him. "Because he was my mentor. He believed in me when no one else did." Whispers rippled down the table like wind rustling through dry leaves. Bradley tilted his head, whispering furiously to Claire, while Vanessa's lips parted in shock. Even Diane's hands trembled slightly as she folded her napkin. Gregory placed the watch gently back on Emily's wrist, his voice carrying weight. "Do you all understand what you're looking at? That's not just a watch. That's a $2 million piece of craftsmanship, and it is proof that Walter Sterling trusted her with something greater than gold." Gasps rose, followed by the clatter of a dropped fork. Aunt Martha coughed on her wine, while Jason sat back, his face pale. The atmosphere had turned, and the arrogance that had filled the room only moments ago had drained away, replaced by a tense, almost fearful curiosity. Harold was the first to recover. He leaned forward, his tone skeptical but laced with new interest. "So tell us, Emily, what exactly have you been building that caught Walter Sterling's attention?" The question sliced through the silence. All eyes turned back to her. Their earlier mockery now transformed into hunger for answers. "What exactly has my niece been building that I don't know about?" Harold Mercer's voice slices through the silence. "What has she been hiding from us?" His question sparks a storm of curiosity, suspicion, and envy around the table. A chill ran beneath the candle glow as Emily Grant steadied her breath. In quieter hours, Walter Sterling had warned her that recognition would not arrive alone. It would bring hands reaching. The memory rose now like a lighthouse in fog, and she anchored herself to it while faces around the table sharpened with questions they had never bothered to ask before. She understood the turn this night had taken. It was no longer about enduring a round of gossip and boasts. The purpose had shifted to disclosure and control. How much to reveal, and to whom? How to protect the integrity of what she had built? How to meet envy without letting it poison the room? The dining room had surrendered its warmth. Candles burned lower, their flames wavering in drafts from the old windows. Turkey cooled on porcelain platters. Pumpkin pies waited untouched near the sideboard. The polished silver that had glittered under laughter now looked like props left over from a play that had ended. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked with an almost ecclesiastical insistence, measuring the distance between every word. Gregory Grant's chair creaked softly as he leaned forward. "You all know Walter Sterling's name," he said, each syllable careful. If he entrusted her with that watch, he entrusted her with more than a keepsake. He did not look at Harold or Jason. He looked only at his daughter, and his hand tightened around the old whiskey glass as if it were a guardrail on a steep path. Diane Grant pressed her fingers to the string of pearls at her throat, as though the familiar coolness might put her thoughts in order. "Emily," she began, tentative, "if there is more to tell, perhaps this is the time." Jason found his smile again, thinner now, but still a blade. "By all means," he said. "Enlighten us." Emily straightened. "Walter came to advise a failing startup where I worked. He saw something in the way I asked questions. Later, when I left to build my own platform, he was my first investor. He did not ask for a pitch deck. He asked for a promise, to build something that mattered and to keep control until it did." A rustle of disbelief moved through the cousins. Vanessa set down her glass too quickly and a bead of champagne slid over her knuckle. Bradley glanced toward Harold as if seeking a cue. Claire's phone lay face down now, forgotten. "What platform?" Harold said, voice smooth but sharp at the edges. "For what market?" "Operations," Emily replied. "Predictive models that help organizations run efficiently. We began with small businesses no one else would touch. Then hospitals. Then agencies that spend taxpayer money and want waste reduced. The technology optimizes workflows. The results are measurable." Gregory nodded once, the gesture quiet but firm. "They won a contract last month," he said, speaking to the room. "Rollout will take years. The value is near $1 billion. The silence that followed felt physical. Someone's fork tapped the rim of a plate and then stilled. Diane's pearls clicked faintly beneath her fingertips. In the kitchen, a distant drawer slid open and shut. Domestic sounds that made the revelation feel even larger by contrast. Jason's laugh was brittle. "So you have been lying to us all along," he said, "playing poor for sport." Emily held his gaze. "I have not lied. I chose privacy. There is a difference." Vanessa blinked rapidly, as though trying to reconcile the woman in a simple blouse with the arithmetic she had just heard. "But why live so small?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. "Why buses and rented offices if the numbers are what you say?" Because Walter taught me that wealth without purpose turns hollow, Emily said. And because I like hearing my neighbors on the morning train argue about baseball instead of watching strangers drive past a gate. Harold cleared his throat, and the sound carried the tone of a pivot. Family has always amplified its own, he said smoothly. Your father and I built reputations that helped everyone seated here. If there is influence to be shared, if there are boards to join, introductions to make, it seems obvious those should flow through family channels. Imagine the reach. The doors that open more easily when we coordinate. The word coordinate landed like a hook hidden in bait. Gregory's jaw tightened. Careful, Harold. But Harold was already leaning back, legalese in his posture. I am merely speaking of alignment. If Emily's success rests on a foundation of our name, our legacy, our network, it does not, Gregory said, the interruption gentle but immovable. Jason recovered his bravado with a shrug that felt practiced. No one builds alone. Not really. Perhaps it is time for transparent ownership. Equity for family would be a sign of respect. Emily felt the room looking for her reaction the way a field leans toward weather. She could have said that the cap table bore only her name and a line for Sterling's trust, that every term was written so the company could not be pressured into a sale. She could have explained algorithms and pilots and the quiet victories that never make the society pages. Instead, she let her eyes pass slowly over each face, not hostile, not pleading, merely seeing. It is not disrespect to protect what you have built, she said. It is responsibility. Diane's voice entered on a sigh. We wanted you comfortable, darling. If this is true, if it is all true, why not allow yourself a life that reflects it? Emily answered more softly. Because excess does not make me more honest. Because comfort is not the same as character. Something in Gregory's expression eased, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. He turned to Harold. You do not get to claim credit for what you belittled yesterday, he said quietly, and you will not steer it now. Jason's cheeks colored. So this is how it is. She hides, then preaches. Emily did not raise her voice. No, I've been living my truth. You only measured me by what I didn't show. The words settled like ash after a fire, soft but final. Beyond the windows the Hudson lay dark. A ribbon of iron under the moon. A draft moved through the room and the candles guttered. Gregory's fingers tightened once more around the old whiskey glass. Diane's pearls clicked as she adjusted them, a small sound in the hush. Harold's gaze slid to his son, and something passed between them, calculation perhaps, or a simple recognition that the old family map had been redrawn without their permission. He faced Emily again, mouth curved in a smile that showed no warmth. Perhaps the family deserves a greater share of what you've been building. Later that night, when most of the family had drifted from the dining room to the library for after-dinner drinks, Emily moved quietly along the corridor. She heard the low rumble of voices before she reached the door, and she slowed, her hand against the cool wood paneling. Inside, Harold Mercer's tone was hushed but unmistakably sharp. If she controls it, we'll never see a cent. But if we corner her, the unfinished sentence hung in the air like the strike of a match. She stood motionless, her breath caught in her chest. Walter Sterling's warning echoed through memory. The moment they see your success, they will try to claim it. It was no longer an abstract lesson. The betrayal was unfolding in real time, and the whispers were not of mere envy, but of a scheme meant to strip her of everything she had fought to build. The chapter's conflict was now clear. The Mercers would not stop at mockery. They intended to press, to coerce, perhaps even to sabotage. Emily understood that her task was no longer to defend her dignity, but to prepare her revenge, not petty vengeance, but the precise kind that revealed character and preserved integrity. The library carried the weight of generations. Mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound law books, oil lamps casting amber halos over the room, a fire snapping in the grate. The air smelled of cigar smoke and aged bourbon, of nights when family power had been measured and bartered within these walls. Tonight was no different. Jason's voice joined his father's, lower, uncertain. If she keeps majority control, we'll never get influence. She'll lock us out forever. His bravado was gone now, replaced by unease. Emily could almost picture him, hunched forward, struggling between greed and shame. Harold's reply came with a chill certainty. Then we don't give her the choice. Family reputation opens doors she cannot. We remind her of her obligations. Pressure, Jason, that's how this game is played. Emily closed her eyes, the betrayal cutting deep. She thought of Sterling, of the night he had pressed the watch into her hand, telling her that it was meant to remind her of worth, not what others thought of it. She breathed through the ache, opening her eyes to the firelight spilling across the hall floor. A soft creak behind her startled her. Gregory had entered from another corridor and now stood at her shoulder. His face was grave as he listened for a moment to Harold's words within. Without speaking, he guided Emily a few steps back from the door. "I thought as much," he murmured, voice barely above the hiss of the fire. "He won't be satisfied until he has a piece of it." Emily turned to him. "They mean to corner me." "You built it without them," Gregory said firmly. "You can hold it without them." His eyes, gray and steady, bore into hers. "But you will have to fight them where they think you are weakest." Inside, a burst of laughter. Harold pouring bourbon, his voice rising again. "With the Grant name and Mercer connections, the girl won't stand a chance against us. She'll hand it over." Emily stepped away from the door and walked into the room. The firelight caught the silver of her watch as she lifted her hand to pour herself a glass of water from the sideboard. Heads turned. Harold's expression flickered with surprise before he rearranged it into a smile. "Niece," he said, dripping false warmth, "we were just speaking of family, how family must always look after its own." Emily met his gaze squarely. "Were you?" Jason shifted uncomfortably, but Harold pressed forward. "You've done well, clearly. But a company is more than one person. Think what you could accomplish if you aligned with us. Our connections, our name, your ideas." He lifted his glass in a mock salute. "It's only natural for family to share in success." Emily sipped her water, allowing silence to stretch. Her eyes never leaving his. "Natural," she repeated softly. "Or convenient?" His smile did not falter. "Convenient and inevitable. Hand us a steak, or you'll regret it." The words landed with the weight of a threat cloaked in civility. Gregory's jaw tightened, but Emily lifted a hand, stopping him from speaking. She let the firelight gleam across the watch before slipping her sleeve back down. Her voice was quiet, each word deliberate. "Careful, Uncle. You may regret underestimating me." Morning sunlight broke through the tall windows of the Mercer estate, painting gold across the heavy drapes and polished wooden floor. The family had gathered again, summoned by Harold for what he called a final conversation. Emily sat quietly at the long oak table, her hands folded, her eyes calm but sharp, as though she had been waiting for this very stage to be set. She remembered Sterling's voice in her mind. "Do not fight in the shadows where they hold advantage. Make them reveal themselves in the light." This was the moment, and the betrayal that had simmered in whispered corners was about to face the scrutiny of daylight. The goal of this morning was clear: confrontation. Harold and Jason believed they could corner Emily into surrender, but Emily knew it was time to bring the truth forward and expose their hypocrisy in front of witnesses who would remember every word. The room was steeped in tradition, oil portraits of stern ancestors looking down from the walls, the faint scent of beeswax polish and black coffee drifting from the sideboard. Aunt Martha perched near the end of the table, her rosary quietly clicking between her fingers, while Gregory stood just behind Emily's chair, silent but unwavering in his presence. Harold rose, his voice commanding the room. "Family," he began, spreading his arms as though presiding over a courtroom. "We are here because one of our own believes she stands apart. Emily has forgotten that her success was only possible because of the Mercer name." He turned toward her, eyes gleaming with calculated superiority. "But names carry obligations, and we, her family, are entitled to share in what she has built." Jason shifted uneasily but nodded, echoing his father. "It's only fair. We have a reputation to uphold. She cannot simply shut us out." Emily rose slowly, the chair scraping against the wood with deliberate weight. She let silence fall until every eye was on her. Her gaze swept across the table, pausing on Martha's worried expression, then on Harold's smug smile. "You say the Mercer name is the foundation of my work," she said evenly. "But when I began, where were you? When I asked for support, for encouragement, where were you? I was told my ideas were foolish, that my place was at the margins. And now that I stand here with proof in hand, you come not with pride, but with demands." A murmur rippled across the table. Harold's smile faltered, then hardened. "You are twisting our words. We only want what is just." Emily stepped forward and laid a folder onto the table. Inside were contracts, signed agreements, and letters of credit, all marked with her name alone. She opened it slowly, deliberately, for the family to see. "Justice is not theft, Uncle. Justice is truth. And the truth is this: I built Sterling Innovations with no Mercer hand upon it." The climax surged as Harold reached for the folder, but Gregory placed a steady hand on it first, his presence a barrier that Harold could not cross without showing violence. Harold's voice broke, harsh and defensive. "You will regret this arrogance. No woman in this family has ever stood against its men without paying dearly." Emily looked at him, unflinching. "Then perhaps it is time the pattern ended." A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. Jason's eyes darted toward his father, doubt plain in his face. Martha closed her rosary in her hand, whispering a prayer under her breath. Harold leaned closer across the table, his voice a hiss now, stripped of all civility. "This is not over. You may think you have won today, but the Mercers have long memories." Emily lifted the watch at her wrist, letting the chain catch the sunlight. "So do I." The room seemed to still around her, the portraits, the ticking clock, the very air itself waiting. It was not the end of the war, but it was the end of Harold's illusion of control. And as the family absorbed her defiance, a knock sounded at the great double doors of the estate. A messenger entered, his face pale, carrying an envelope marked with the Sterling seal. Emily took it, her hands steady, though her heart quickened. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the page before she looked up, her voice carrying across the table. "They've uncovered something," she said, her tone cold and certain, something Harold never expected anyone to find. In the end, the Mercer estate no longer felt like a fortress of power, but a monument to pride, greed, and the slow unraveling of a family's soul. Emily had walked into that house as a niece accused, cornered, and underestimated, yet she left it as a woman who carried not only her own strength, but the truth of generations before her. The whispers of betrayal that once haunted the corridors had now become voices of justice, spoken aloud for all to hear. Gregory's quiet loyalty had stood as proof that not all bonds of blood were tainted, that even in the darkest quarrels of kin, there could be light in a single steadfast heart. Aunt Martha's rosary beads, clutched so tightly, became a symbol of those who pray for peace but bear witness to conflict, the silent guardians of conscience. And Harold, once so towering in his arrogance, was left diminished, his schemes exposed, his power broken by the very truths he tried to bury. What remained was the lesson that families are not defined by the weight of names, nor by legacies of property and pride, but by the loyalty they choose to uphold when tested by fire. A family that betrays its own is no family at all. It is merely a collection of strangers bound by blood but divided by greed. Yet a family that stands together in truth, no matter how small, no matter how wounded, carries strength enough to face the world. Emily's triumph was not merely her own. It was a victory for every quiet daughter or overlooked son who has been told they do not belong, who has been asked to sacrifice their dreams for the vanity of others. Her revenge was measured not in cruelty, but in revelation, not in destruction, but in justice. And that is what made it lasting. The moral shines clear. Loyalty is a choice, betrayal is a wound, and justice, though often slow, arrives to those who hold steadfast to truth. Greed may glitter, secrets may poison, but only love and integrity can endure. In the end, true family is not those who demand your success, but those who share your burdens, honor your struggles, and rejoice in your triumph without jealousy. The philosophy remains: blood may bind us, but loyalty defines us. If this story stirred your heart, if it made you reflect on family, betrayal, and the quiet strength of justice, then leave it number 1 in the comments. And remember, subscribe to our channel to hear the next tale for more stories of betrayal revealed, revenge carried out, and justice finally served. For in every family, there lies a secret waiting to be told.